Hey friends, I wanted to share with you how today's sponsor, Babbel, has helped me on my language learning journey. Learning a new language has always been a personal goal of mine, but with my busy schedule, I found it hard to commit to traditional language classes. But that's where Babbel comes in. What I love about Babbel is how easy and convenient it is to use. With just a few minutes a day, I'm able to learn a new language from anywhere, anytime. I remember this one time, I thought I was clever and tried to order food at a Mexican restaurant using my limited Spanish skills and ended up getting something completely different from what I wanted. But thanks to Babbel, nightmare situations like that are a thing of the past. I'm continuing my learning, and I have to say I'm incredibly impressed with how far I've progressed. Here, let me show you. Me amo. Gracias. ¿Dónde está el baño? Or if you ever find yourself at the market, déjame ver los plátanos. So, if you're interested in learning a new language just like me, I highly recommend Babbel. And as a special offer for my viewers, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the side of the screen here to get 60% off your subscription. Let me know in the comments which language you'd like to learn and why. In the early 20s, I landed a receptionist job in a sales office at a manufactured housing community. It was my first office job after working in daycare in the food and drink industry. I was excited. I greeted potential buyers, set up appointments, and staged the spec homes with our stock of furniture and decorations. I worked with one other person in the office who was the salesman. When he was out of the office, I took potential buyers through our spec homes and gathered their information for follow-up. I was working alone one day when a customer came into the office looking to potentially purchase his first home. I gathered some information from the young man and asked if he would like to look at some spec homes. As we walked down the sidewalk toward the row of spec homes, we chatted about the various floor plans and finishes available. I knew the product information and had no trouble confidently answering his questions. He was friendly and reminded me of a classmate from high school that had played offense on the football team. I decided to show him the two home models that best fit his price range and desired floor plan. Since I shared most of the technical information during the first home tour, I gave him some space to freely look around the second home. He walked through the main living area and stopped in the doorway to one of the back bedrooms. He called out, "Hey, what's this back here?" and pointed to the corner of the room that I couldn't see from where I was standing. I knew these floor plans by heart, so I politely answered that it was a closet. In my mind, I was sarcastically thinking, "Really? You don't know what a closet is?" He chuckled and asked again, "No, really, come here. What is this back here?" I could tell by his tone that he was pressuring me to come see for myself. He motioned for me to come closer and take a look. His tone was friendly, but his request just didn't make sense, so I paused. And in that split second, something shifted. Maybe it was the energy in the air, the hairs on my neck standing straight up, or the way his eyes changed before me. I suddenly sensed the power dynamic had shifted, and I didn't feel safe. With all the light-heartedness that I could muster, I repeated, "Oh, it's a closet. Excuse me for a moment, I need to check on something outside." I quickly made my exit back to the sidewalk outside the house. I had no concrete reason why I felt the overwhelming need to leave the house immediately. I didn't understand why my body sensed danger. I just knew that I needed to act quickly. Over the next few days, the young man came back to the office to meet with the salesman. He filled out all the various paperwork needed to purchase a home and live within the community. He dropped by several more times unannounced to check on his application status. If I wasn't there, he would ask the salesman when I worked next. My coworker thought that I had a not-so-secret admirer. I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling something just wasn't right, so on the nights I worked alone, I locked the office door. A few days later, corporate sent back their analysis of the young man's application and completed background check. He had been denied. The background check revealed multiple assault convictions and violating multiple people. And there it was. Crystal clear, undeniable 2020 hindsight. The salesman called the customer right away to let him know his application had been denied and that we could not do anything further for him. A few days later, the young man decided to come back to the office one more time. When my coworker saw the young man's vehicle in our parking lot, he told me to go to the back room of the office where I would be out of sight. And just like the times before, the young man entered the office asking if I was working. This time he was met by a very angry 6-foot salesman that had nothing to lose. I had never heard my coworker raise his voice before, but on that day his voice shook the office walls. Needless to say, the young man never came back again, and I wasn't scheduled to work alone nearly as often. But I still wondered to myself, what would he have done if I went to investigate his question earlier? When I was about 21 years old, I worked as a table server at a pizza chain restaurant located in a new shopping center near my residence on evenings and weekends. It was a part-time job for me. I was part of the opening staff at this brand new place, which was very popular at the time. There were several shifts of employees, and a few trainers came from other nearby locations to work at the brand new location. One of these cooks were named John. He was only a couple of years older than me and worked as a kitchen manager or something similar. Whenever I forgot to ring something in or made a mistake and he was working, I'd go back to the kitchen and tell him, and he would often help me or give me extra sauce or whatever was needed. Usually he was doing inventory or paperwork type stuff, like food temp checks, etc. He was always really nice to me, never raised his voice or got angry. He was soft-spoken, a kind of quiet guy. I was engaged at the time and there was no flirting or anything. He was quiet and didn't seem interested in me like that. He just did his job and we'd briefly chat when we worked the same schedule. I quit about 4 to 5 months after opening the restaurant and didn't stay in contact with most of the staff, including him. Now fast forward a month or two after I quit and I was reading a news article. The name in the article was the same as the guy that I had worked with, and he had starved his stepson to death and kept him in a locked closet. I looked it up, and his picture came up, and it was the same guy, and I was completely dumbfounded. He had gotten custody of his ex-girlfriend's child, no blood relation to him, although there was another younger boy in the home who was John's biological child, and I believe a half-brother. He also had a live-in girlfriend who was not related to either child. The boy was like 30 pounds total when he was found at 7 years old. This poor child was made to use a litter box the last few weeks of his life and kept in a small linen closet. And to think, his stepfather was a cook. If there were money issues, he could have easily taken food from the restaurant and no one would have known. Employees got a free meal each shift. He had so many ways to feed this child. He was sentenced to life in prison. And I still think of this poor kid who never had a chance, and about the guy who hurt him, who was unassuming, friendly but quiet or shy, capable of a job and training others for it. What is wrong with people like him? What made it okay to be like, you deserve this, kid? It still haunts me to this day, how this happened to someone or by something that made an adult truly dislike a child enough to do this, and to convince an adult woman of the same, to not get him help. The moral of the story is that you really never can judge a book by its cover. I've contemplated posting this for years, but the emotional capital of writing this out always feels too heavy. It chills me to this day when I think about what happened, or should I say, could have happened to my sister and I in 2007. I was 25, she was 23. We were living in Phoenix and living a pretty wild life, lots of partying. However, she could keep it in check. I was a blackout drunk. Now, side note, as of April 20th, I've had 15 years without a drink. We were out with some friends at a party. I was particularly stupid that night and took my friend's car key to go pick up this couple that I had met earlier in the night. They were Eastern European, I forget which country exactly, and needless to say I was wasted and completely reckless. My sister called me while I was out, all upset because our friend discovered that I took her car. I went back to the party and was promptly screamed at and kicked out, rightfully so. My sister was so embarrassed and crying. She was really intoxicated too, which wasn't a normal thing for her. I remember we were walking to find a taxi or something, and it was all pretty hazy to me. The next thing I know, we're in the back of a car at a gas station on Grand Avenue. This street leads off into an old Arizona interstate highway. The random European couple that I had met earlier and didn't end up picking up were trying to open the door and get us out of the car. They had happened to be at this gas station at probably 1 a.m. I don't even know how they spotted me. They must have sensed the trouble. I have hazy details, but I know that they were frantic and insistent about getting us out of the car. From what they told us, the man driving the car appeared to be a total creep and no one I would seemingly want to associate with. I have no recollection of how we ended up in his car, who he was, or where he was taking us, and why he needed to fill his tank in between. Sometimes I think about the mysterious couple. Maybe they were angels sent to look after us. Both my sister and I were missing our phones the next day, and I'm certain that that man had taken them. There's a number of things that could have happened that night, and I feel very fortunate that we're still alive. It racks me with guilt that I put my little sister in that situation, and any time I feel like picking up a drink, it's one of the memories that I play back to remind myself where alcohol takes me. This happened years ago when I was barely 14. My middle school and middle school of my best friend at the time organized a trip abroad to Great Britain, London to be exact. It was supposed to be a few days looking at London attractions, museums, and shops, and it was fun. Until it wasn't. On the day before we were supposed to leave and go home, we were brought to some interesting shops and given free time for shopping. Then our teacher and guide had a brilliant idea. They told us that after the shopping time ended, that we had to meet at a different street. In retrospect, it was only about 100 meters away, but they still should not have done that. Most of us had never been to London, and we barely spoke English, and we didn't have a map of the city. Roaming services didn't work correctly either. 90% of the students got lost. My best friend and I got lost because we went in a completely opposite direction. We were both confused about the directions that we were given at the time. We were walking along the pavement. My friend was running ahead or staying behind to nervously look around. We didn't look like we were together because we were not interacting with each other, and I guess that's why this happened. My friend ran ahead and stopped to look around, and that's when I saw a black car approach me and match my speed. I started to feel like this was a scene from a movie. It was broad daylight. There were a lot of people around and no one reacted. I was confused and didn't know what was happening. Then a man stepped out of the car and said, "Hey, you look nice. Come with me," and tried to grab me. The car was still running, so I suppose someone was still in it. I was stunned and I didn't believe it was real. At that moment, my friend ran to me from behind, grabbed me, and dragged me away. We ran and tried to lose any tail if a man or a car was following us. After some time, we stopped, and my friend nervously cried while shaking and screaming why I didn't move when the man tried to catch me. I explained that I had a sort of deer in headlights type moment. We cooled down and managed to ask some people for help, and we were found by our teachers. We didn't tell anyone there what had happened, and we were sure no one would believe us. After that, when we got back, I told my parents, and I never went on a trip organized by my school again. My mom considered all of that really unprofessional and irresponsible. I went to a college in a historic mid-sized city in Florida, and at the time lived in a duplex downtown, maybe 3 blocks from campus. The city is known to be pretty safe, and I lived in a pretty decent area with large historic homes near me. The story takes place around 3 years ago. A little backstory that will become relevant: the duplex I lived in had a front door that locked, and then both the upstairs and downstairs units had their own locking door. I lived downstairs and had 2 roommates, but this specific night, only one of my roommates was home. We knew the girls that lived upstairs, but only really spoke to them in passing. When they moved in, we emphasized how important it was to us for them to keep the main front door locked, and they did a good job of doing so. So my roommate and I are in for the night, knowing the front door is locked, and smoke a few joints. At some point, we hear a knock at the front door and quickly realize the girls upstairs had ordered a pizza. Later on, it becomes evident that they never locked the front door after receiving their pizza. So we finally go to sleep in our rooms, and since I had a queen bed, I would often sleep with my phone and laptop next to me in my bed. A couple of hours after I fell asleep, I woke up to a man standing over my bed. As soon as I realize that I'm not dreaming, I notice that he is quickly moving my phone and computer off my bed and moving my comforter, trying to get in to my bed. I start to ask him who he is, what he's doing here, and just generally confused as I was still slightly high from before I went to sleep. The only thing he said to me was, and multiple times, was that, "I'm just trying to get in bed. I'm just trying to get in bed." At this point, I begin to panic, as my mind obviously goes to the worst. I was hoping that maybe my roommate had invited some random Tinder guy over and that he had gone to the wrong room, but the more I questioned him, all he had to say was, "I'm just trying to get in bed." I own pepper spray and a stun gun, but I had accidentally left them on a shelf that the guy was standing in front of, so there was no way that I would be able to grab them without escalating the situation. Realizing that I need to do something quick, I blurted out, "There are 5 people who live in this house, and if you don't get the F out of here now, I'll scream, and they'll all be here within seconds." Luckily, that was all it took to scare him off. I don't know if he had brought something with him or if he had stole something from me, but I saw him grab something in the dark and run out of my room. As soon as he left my room, I shut the door and locked it and tried to find my phone. I couldn't find it anywhere, but then quickly realized that between my room and the front door is the room of my friend that was home. As scared as I was terrified that the guy had maybe gone into her room. So I grabbed my stun gun and a pocket knife, counting to 3, and ripped open my door. I ran into my roommate's room, and she was fast asleep, and there was no evidence of the guy. I told her what happened, and she asked me if I was sure that I wasn't dreaming. I began to question myself until I walked out of her room and saw that our front door was wide open. I went to my room to search for my phone and finally found it hidden under a pile of clothes across the room from where I had left it. That sent a chill up my spine, as I immediately knew for a fact that someone had been in my house and room while I was sleeping, and long enough to hide my phone, which only worsened my suspicions of its intentions. I ran back to my roommate's room, who at that point believed me, and we barricaded ourselves into the room and called 911. Within minutes, police cars were swarming our street and yard, and they yelled for us to quickly leave the residence and run towards them. At least a dozen police officers came running in and searched every inch of our apartment, woke up the girls upstairs, and searched their apartment to ensure that the man had left. The officers then had me write a statement, and I gave them a description of the man. To this day, I had never heard a single thing about the case. I feel incredibly lucky with the outcome of the situation, but the thought of his intentions terrifies me. Additionally, the fact that he was never caught scares me, as I would hate for anyone else to have to go through the pure fear that I did. I will add that there is a chance that he was on drugs or maybe mentally ill and didn't actually have any bad intentions. However, because he was never caught, I'll never know, and my mind will always assume the worst. This was my second year at university. Late at night, after hitting the bars, my 2 roommates and I were heavily intoxicated. An acquaintance asked me if his friend, who was from out of town and too drunk to drive home, could spend the night at our house. No problem for us, as we considered ourselves stand-up guys with plenty of room and a comfy couch for him to sleep on. Our guest introduced himself, but asked that we call him Bullwinkle, as it was his preferred nickname. No problem, whatever. Before I passed out that evening, my girlfriend stopped by and, we did the thing. She left shortly after. The only reason I mentioned that is that from where Bullwinkle was sleeping, it had to be obvious what was happening. he must have heard us or at least been aware. Eventually, I passed out in bed alone. Very early in the morning, I was halfway woken to the sensation of something tugging at my underwear, basically being pulled down in a way that must have exposed my junk. Half drunk and barely conscious, I sat up and said something like, "What the hell?" I sort of half-registered Bullwinkle, quickly leaving my bedside and quietly throwing himself to the floor, hands over his head. Not being fully conscious, I stared at Bullwinkle lying in a heap on the floor for a while, not fully comprehending the situation, then lay back down for a second. I'm not sure if I went back to sleep, but I was wide awake after I heard the front door slam. Wide awake and finally beginning to comprehend everything, I paced the house for a couple of minutes, checked that the doors were locked, and confirmed that Bullwinkle had left the building, and then I woke up my roommates. My roommates also noticed that their underwear was pulled down, sheets and blankets were pulled back, dresser drawers were left open, and underwear was missing. We talked a bit about what to do. We searched for this Bullwinkle and discussed calling the police, but we rejected that idea partly because of how embarrassing that conversation might be, and partly because none of us were hurt and nothing valuable was taken. I tried calling my acquaintance, but no one answered. So we all went back to bed. No one ever heard from this Bullwinkle again, and his friends say that he just sort of disappeared abruptly. This happened a few years ago, and it still rattles me when I think about it. For context, I am a female who was around 25 years old at the time. I worked in an office of around 150 people. One day I received an email from a coworker whose name I didn't recognize, and the email basically said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry if I did something to offend you. Given the situation, if you'd prefer never to see me again, I understand and will avoid you in the kitchen." I was extremely perplexed as I had no idea who this guy was, but I must have done something to offend him, right? I responded back along the lines of, "I'm so sorry if I offended you. Sometimes I zone out, and it can be perceived as if though I'm rude, so I do apologize." After this response, he started getting irritated, basically denying my apology and acting all passive-aggressive about it. I wish I had kept a screenshot of those emails, but basically he was just confusing me with this misunderstanding, so I sent him a message suggesting that we resolve this in person. Big mistake. He agreed to meet me in the kitchen in the office. I went there and immediately saw a tall, 30-ish-year-old guy whom I had seen around but never met before. I explained to him that I apologize, but truthfully had no idea who he was, and had never even met him before and didn't want any issues. What happened after made me very concerned. His face flushed bright red, and he looked visibly angry. He was stuttering and denying that I didn't know who he was, and then he said, "You've been staring at me for months. When you made eye contact with me, you gasped and ran away." Okay. This was weird. I strongly denied this and told him that it was a mistake, but he kept insisting that I had been staring at him for months and that he could always see me doing it. Eventually, I realized that he couldn't see reason and decided to just end the conversation. Upon reflection, I realized that it's possible that he thought that I was staring at him because when you walk in the hallway next to the kitchen, there is a room with glass at the end where a bunch of desks are. His desk would be right in line of sight if I was walking down the hallway and had a funny sticker on his desk I'd sometimes look at, but this seems like a huge stretch. After this incident, a coworker pulled me over and asked me why I was talking to him, and I explained the situation. She looked scared and told me that last year he appeared in the office in a bathrobe, raving like some madman at people, and he wasn't fired then. Was I dealing with someone in the midst of a psychosis? Was he dangerous? No clue, but I reported this ASAP to my manager, who took it seriously enough to tell his manager. I don't think he works there anymore, and thankfully I left this company 2 weeks later because I was extra cautious to not go anywhere near this dude. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I, were in our young 20s, were on a home stretch of a big road trip with our dog. As it had been a while since we last stopped, we pulled into a rest stop off the freeway to stretch the legs and let the doggo do his thing. When we pulled into the rest stop, there were no cars and 3 big semi-trucks parked in a line. Immediately, my girlfriend got out to go into the restroom. I leashed up the dog and stood next to the car, and as she was walking towards the entry door, I thought that I heard someone yell behind me. To my surprise, it was a trucker in the driver's seat of his truck with the window rolled down trying to get my attention. Now, I am generally friendly towards all people, whether they seem shady or not, generally willing to lend a helping hand. Behind me in the truck was an older gentleman, large with gray hair and sunglasses. His truck was so loud that I couldn't hear what he was saying, so I yelled back, "What?" The trucker yelled something inaudible 3 more times, and I asked him what, while shaking my head and holding up my hands to inform him that I couldn't hear him. At this point, he seemed visually annoyed that I said what 4 times. Okay, that might be understandable. I wanted to see what the deal was with this guy, so I walked halfway between the car and his passenger side truck. "What did you say?" I asked. "Can you help me look for my phone? I lost it somewhere," the trucker said. At this point, I was super caught off guard, as this had all unfolded within the 20 to 30 seconds that we parked at the rest stop. To me, it was weird that a trucker was asking a random person stopping at a rest stop to help look for their phone, but maybe he just wanted me to call it. "Where'd you lose it at?" I asked. "I lost it in my truck. Can you just come up here and help me look for it?" The trucker replied in an unnerving tone. In that moment, I was just incredibly sketched out. I thought I was about to be abducted. Phone call I could do, but no way was I about to get into this trucker's cab to look for his phone. "Yeah, no," I said sternly, but half-heartedly, as I almost thought that this guy was joking with me. After a few moments, the trucker then says, "You won't help me look for it?" My adrenaline was pumping, so I yelled back, "You know what, why don't you just get out of here?" in a threatening tone, knowing well that I had nothing to defend us should something go wrong. I put the doggo back into the car and pulled out my phone to pretend that I was calling the cops while he slowly drove and then stopped again to ask if I was going to help. I then screamed again, "No, get the F out of here, I'm calling the cops." And after that reply, he stepped on the gas and just exited to the freeway. I stood and watched when finally my girlfriend exited the rest stop, wondering why I looked like I just saw a ghost. Now, I don't know if this was an overreaction, but it sketched me out that he had to ask me to climb into the truck. This happened a long time ago, about 10 years or so, but I never forgot about it and it still gives me chills. I, a 33-year-old female, was in my early 20s at the time. At the time, I had a female dog named Nina, a boxer. She passed away when she was 8 from lung cancer, and I miss her dearly. Nina was very energetic, so I took her on long walks around the neighborhood, usually at the end of the day at around 4 to 6 p.m. when it was not too hot, but not dark either. One thing that you must know about Nina is that she loved people. She didn't get along with other dogs, but every time she saw someone walking by us, she would shake her tail and want to get closer and ask for pets. One day, we went on our walk as usual. Everything was fine for the most part. I saw a few other dog tutors walking their dogs and an old couple sitting in front of their house chatting. And then when we were alone, Nina suddenly started growling. One thing I didn't mention is that I graduated in biology and specialized in animal behavior. At the time this story happened, I was finishing college. So yeah, I used to pay a lot of attention to my dog's behaviors and had quite a lot of knowledge about dog behavior because it was my favorite subject in the area. Dogs can see movement much better than us, so things like eyebrow raising or a little tension on the shoulders, they can easily pick it up. So of course a dog growling doesn't sound that weird. Nina did growl at other dogs and cats when she saw them, but this was different. It was very low and the fur on her back was up. Her entire behavior was of alarm. And then I noticed that she was looking back while growling. So I looked behind me, and in the distance, like blocks away, I saw a man. This made me even more alert because Nina never growled at anyone in the street before. She never stopped walking by my side or tried to pull away, but she kept this low growl and kept looking at this man. I started to freak out and turn the next block. She stopped for a second, but when we reached the next corner, she started growling again. There he was again. He didn't try to talk, call out to me, and his expression was serious, kind of emotionless. I kept walking in random patterns, and he was always still there. That man was definitely following me. At some point, our distances started to shrink, and Nina's growling was getting stronger. So when I turned the next corner, I started running while he couldn't see me. I ran down about 4 blocks in the direction of an area that I knew had more traffic and people around. I stopped to catch my breath and looked behind me. He was far away, right at the corner of where I started running. Just there, standing, clearly staring at me. Nina was looking at him, still with her alarm posture. After a minute, he turned around and went away in the same direction, and at that moment, Nina finally relaxed. I kept paying attention to Nina's behavior the entire way back to my house later, but she was just her normal, happy self. I told this story to my parents and a few neighbors, and no one seemed to know of any man that looked like him, and I never saw that guy again, and Nina never behaved like that again either to anyone else, so I'll never know who he was or why he was following me, but I definitely don't regret trusting Nina's instincts. So people, please pay attention to your pet's behaviors as much as you can. It's not about a supernatural sixth sense. They can actually feel, see, and hear things better than us, and there's no behavior that happens for no reason. There's always a reason. Stay safe, everyone. I thought I'd share my experience in case anyone's been through something similar or has an idea of what kind of scenario I was dealing with. I was driving home from the gym at night and pulled up to a red light near a local courthouse. I noticed the driver of a white Jeep 1 lane over staring at me. Older guy, I guess late 40s to 50s with long sideburns. I'm a 31-year-old male, though without additional context I have no idea if this matters. I turned and looked at him, and he started pointing toward me and towards my left. At first, I thought that he wanted to cut in front of me when the light turned green, which is strange because there was no one coming behind us imminently, so he could have just waited for me to go. But I guess someone else might pull up. I pointed to my left to confirm that's what he wanted, and then opened my window a tiny bit because he just kept pointing, so I wanted to ask what was up. He didn't open his. The light turned green, and he changed lanes to drive behind me. It feels likely that he was trying to tell me to pull over earlier. I kept driving and changed lanes because he was now tailgating me and followed me immediately. Eventually he switched lanes but was driving erratically, kept putting his left turn signal on but not turning left at several lights, for example. He also slowed down to maintain the same pace as me a few times. Eventually I turned before my actual home route to throw him off. He kept going, but then when I looped around to actually head home, I saw him at the light waiting to turn left on the road towards my house, so I had to keep driving. I have no idea what his intentions were, but that was so incredibly strange and unnerving, to say the least. Click the join button to become a member today for exclusive content. Many years ago, I left an abusive relationship and moved across the country with my cat, Onyx. The apartment I found was a bit run down and located in a sketchy area, but it was all I could afford at the time. One night when I returned from the grocery store, I couldn't find Onyx anywhere. She usually greeted me at the door, but this time she was nowhere to be seen. I looked all over the apartment, crying, but there was no sign of her. It was like she had just disappeared into thin air. For an entire week, I searched for her and put up missing posters all over the neighborhood. But by the end of the 7th day, I had lost hope of finding her. The next morning when I returned from my daily walk, I found my door slightly ajar. I cautiously entered the apartment and saw Onyx sleeping on my couch. I was overjoyed to see her again, but then a sick feeling of horror washed over me. I immediately called the police and my landlord, Jim. The police filed a report, but the perpetrator had left no evidence behind. My apartment had no cameras, and Jim admitted that he had forgotten to change the locks when I moved in. When one of the officers asked if the previous tenant could have been responsible, Jim said that he didn't think so. My apartment had been vacant for a year, and the previous tenant was a single mom who had left early to take a pretty good job opportunity in another city. The incident scared me so much that I decided to just leave the apartment. I'm in a better place now, but I still think about how weird that situation was. I have been living here for 4 years now. During my first year, a man approached me while I was getting groceries out of my trunk and asked for money. As a gesture, I gave him a garbage bag full of cans because I had at least 10 such bags in my basement, and I also gave him a pair of gloves for the winter weather. A few days later, he knocked on my door again and asked for money, but this time he offered me a silver cat statue as an act of kindness. I declined but gave him some spare change. About a month later, he returned and knocked on my door at 2 a.m. I was asleep on the couch and ignored him, knowing it was him and that I had to wake up at 5 a.m. for work. A week later, he came back again at 2 a.m. and I was angry this time. I told him to get off my property and to not come back because I didn't appreciate him showing up and bothering me. Now, about 2 weeks later, he showed up on a Saturday at around 11 p.m. I told him to wait while I got out of the shower and called the police, explaining the situation and how he had been at my house numerous times despite my request for him to leave. 2 police cars arrived about 5 minutes later and the man ran off up the road. About 10 minutes later, one of the officers returned and told me they caught up with him. The man had an outstanding warrant for failing to report and multiple priors for breaking and entering. After that incident, I bought a handgun and learned not to be so trusting. This is the story of the weirdest job interview I've ever had. It happened sometime after February 2018 when my brother's community college was having a job fair. I went there with my resumes, hoping to find a good opportunity. At the fair, we found a table of a company that works with entertainment contracts or something like that. When I handed the guy my resume, he barely glanced at it, but immediately scheduled an interview with me. At that time, I was struggling with mental health issues and it showed on me physically. However, I agreed to the interview. Before the interview, I did some research on the company and found out that they had a very basic website and literally no social media presence. The interview was scheduled at a random building near the freeway. When I arrived, there was no parking available, so I had to park in the neighborhood and walk to the building. I met a friendly guy in his mid-40s who helped me find my way to the floor that I was supposed to be on. However, when I returned to my car to get my resume, I saw the same guy just standing by the window, looking lost. When I finally reached the front desk, I met a very thin blonde girl who interviewed me, and I couldn't help but notice how skinny she was. The whole office was decorated with cheap decorations that I recognized from Target. During the interview, they revealed that they were just handing out Obama phones on the streets, which was not what they had advertised at the job fair. The next week, they scheduled another interview for me, and I met the same old guy who was now conducting the interview. The front desk was now occupied by a young woman who was also unnaturally skinny. The interviewer this time was a young guy in his early 20s, wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big for him, and something felt off, and I decided to just bail out. The whole experience was strange and left me with many questions. I even emailed the community college about it, but they couldn't do much about it, really. And it made me wonder how many other students had fallen for this supposed scam. What was their exact goal? Why were all the female staff so thin, and why did the company have no real social media footprint? I'm still worried about this to this day. This incident occurred last year when I was walking to the bus stop, which is just a 2-minute walk from my home. Usually I listen to music on my headphones while walking, and I had just left the apartment building and was doing the same when suddenly a man who appeared to be around 60 years old started calling me. He repeatedly called out, "Girl, girl, hey girl, girl." I was irritated and paused the song that I was listening to, turned to him and asked in a slightly annoyed tone, "What?" He came closer to me and whispered, "Everything is going to be all right," with this unsettling grin. This made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I checked to see if there was anyone around who could help me if the man did something to me. Unfortunately, there were only 2 grandmas far away from me and the man. I wanted to know what he meant by his words, but my instinct told me to just get away from him as fast as possible, so I started walking fast towards the bus stop. However, the man, who could barely walk before, suddenly started following me, and his pace kept getting faster and faster. I didn't even look back, but I was almost running. I entered a bookshop on the way to the bus stop and looked out the window to see what was happening, and to my horror, I saw the man coming out of the shop, running and searching for me. He checked everywhere, but when he couldn't find me, he just gave up. Now, this experience left me shaken and scared, but I was fortunate enough not to see the man again. I learned to trust my instincts more and not stay in situations that make me feel uncomfortable. As a girl, I've had several such creepy experiences with men, and it's made me very cautious. I always carry a box knife with me, and I keep one in every purse and bag that I own. In Orlando, Florida, I was staying at a resort in Disney World. I was sitting outside on the steps of the courtyard, and a man approached me. We were the only 2 people in the vicinity. The man didn't look like a resort guest. I stood up and he began to talk to me. He asked me what my name was, and me being on the spot, I stupidly told him. He smiled creepily. He asked how long I had been staying there, and I told him I didn't know. He continued to talk to me, making me more and more uncomfortable, and I just wanted to go back to my room and hide. I wasn't giving him detailed answers when responding to his questions, but when I'm on the spot like that and someone I don't know asks me a question, I answer somewhat truthfully. I really don't want to answer truthfully, but when it just comes out, I say it's probably due to anxiety, and I wish I wasn't so honest with random people. If I were to hightail it out of there, he probably wouldn't be able to catch me. The man had graying hair, was tall and muscular, and did not look attractive at all. His questions kept getting weirder, like, "Are your parents here?" And, "What room are you staying in?" Now dusk began to fall, and so many red flags had started to pop up. I'm quite a shy person with people I don't really know anything about, and I tend to give them one-word answers if they ask me any questions. At this point, I wanted to leave very badly. The man got really close and stared into my eyes, making me even more afraid. He was close enough to grab me. Just then, the door leading to the courtyard opened, and I felt scared now. I turned, expecting to see one of the man's friends, but in fact, it was the opposite. It was my amazing great-uncle who came out of the door. Out of all the people staying at the resort, my great-uncle was the one who saved me. The man smiled at him with that same unsettling smile. My great-uncle knew something was up, and so he told me that my parents needed me for something and that I should come with him, and so I did. My uncle held out his hand, and I took it, walking past that creepy man. I shivered as I noticed his eyes following me. My great-uncle asked if I was okay, and I told him I was a bit scared. He asked who that man was, and I told him I didn't know. We were headed to my grandma's room through the vast courtyard. We walked hand in hand on the sidewalk that led to more of the rooms. I kept looking over my shoulder, and the man was still standing at the steps, looking at me and smiling. I believe that my uncle knew what the man's intentions truly were, as did I. The man was probably falling for me, in other words, and he probably was, as my great-uncle put it, a diddler. I'm so grateful that my great-uncle was there to save me. This happened on winter break when I was 17, and still am, and I still think about what happened to this day and shiver at the thought of being diddled. I mean, who doesn't? When we got to my grandma's room, I told my parents everything, and they were relieved that I was safe and unharmed, and thankful that my great-uncle spoke up for me. I'm a 16-year-old female, and I work at Chuck E. Cheese's, and about 4 to 5 hours into my shift, This man shows up with 2 little boys. It was fine for a while, but I noticed that he would look at me with a smug face and say, "Hola," every time I walked by. He didn't speak any English, it seemed. I just smiled and kept walking. That alone made me a little uncomfortable, but later on, as I finished cleaning a table and walking past him again, I noticed that he was filming me. I know that he was filming me because he was moving his phone with me as I walked by, with a camera pointed directly at me. He also tried to quickly put away his phone when he realized that I saw what he did. I tried to explain the situation to my managers and coworkers, thinking that they wouldn't let that slide. However, they proceeded to tell me that it wasn't a big deal and to just stay away from him. I tried to stay away, but it seemed that he was following me around, as every time I would turn around he was right behind me and staring constantly. The only thing that kept me away from him is when I went behind the counter until he left. I think he deserved to be kicked out at the very least, as he was obviously planning something. According to my managers, though, I was just overreacting. But what do you all think? I had a basset hound named Em. She was sweet and cuddly and firmly believed that everyone knew her and loved her, and she loved them in return. Our daily walks were scattered with brief visits with several neighbors so they could pet and love on her. One evening, I was waiting for a delivery from a food service company that came by every 2 weeks. Em loved our regular driver, and he would bring her treats. The truck pulled up in front of the house, and Em's demeanor changed. I had never seen her act like this before, and the hair was up on her back, and she was constantly growling. I saw the driver get out of the truck, and it wasn't my regular driver. Her growling got louder. I didn't know what the issue was, but I knew my dog didn't trust him, so neither did I. The driver usually stepped into the house, but not today. I stepped out to the front stoop, but left the front door open and the glass storm door closed. Em was on the other side of the door, baring her teeth and growling. The driver approached, and I heard a whisper, "Don't show him your back." I stayed facing him while he told me my driver was on vacation. He asked me if I wanted to see the catalog, and there were some new items that he'd like to show me. My dog was going crazy, and my creeper vibe was going crazy too. I firmly told him that I only wanted my pre-order and that I would look at the new items online. He hesitated several minutes like he didn't know what to do next before finally going back to the truck and bringing my order. He asked if it was heavy and if I wanted him to carry it inside. I said, "No, thank you, just set it down, and my son would take care of it." He set it down, hesitated again, and it was awkward and the silence was deafening, so I said, "I believe it was prepaid." And he replied, "Yes, of course." He stood there for a moment more, but I was not turning to go inside until he left. He finally turned and went to the truck and left. Instantly, my happy dog was back, and I opened the door to find my 12-year-old son hiding against the wall next to the door with the largest knife from my kitchen. I gave him a questioning look, and he said, "Em said he's dangerous, and I was going to be ready if he tried anything." It seems that he trusted his dog, too. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursday nights. I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, if you ain't sneezing, you ain't seasoning.